Men, what's the worst date you've experienced? I was invited on a date by a woman I met on Tinder. She mentioned that her friend was in town and they were going to a live podcast, and invited me along. It was a podcast I'd never heard of, and honestly, I probably wouldn't have gone if I hadn't been invited. But it was only $25 to get in. I showed up, we grabbed a drink, and she introduced me to her friend. From there, they basically ignored me and only talked to each other. Then, some guy sat down next to her friend, introduced himself to me, and I thought he was just being friendly. After the podcast, my date and her friend were still chatting away, leaving me out of the conversation entirely. The guy who had introduced himself earlier was still following us around, and eventually started talking to me, which was fine since my date wasn't engaging with me at all. It turns out, this guy was actually her friend's date, but no one bothered to mention that. The girls wanted to meet the host of the podcast, so we all waited in line for a while. Of course, the girls didn't say a word to us guys during this time. They started chatting with another woman in line and seemed to hit it off. After meeting the podcast host, my date's friend turned to us and casually said, "Well, we're going to have a girls' night out now," and just left with the other woman. So, the two of them took off to go get drinks or whatever, and the other guy and I just exchanged a look and said, "What the hell?" We decided to head to a nearby bar for a beer and ended up having a bro date. The other guy was cool, but honestly, the whole situation was just bizarre.